Have you ever seen the big name publishers do an open submission window where people without an agent can take their manuscript and submit it to a big name publishing house? Today we're talking to Bryn Donovan. She actually went through an open submission process with Berkeley and she is now getting her book published. We're going to talk about the process, the behind the scenes, tips and tricks to help you if you are going to be doing an open submission, and what you need to know about to make this as successful as possible. Let's jump in.
I'm Bryn Donovan. I am a book editor, blogger, and author. And my next book coming out with Berkeley is Her Night at the Museum.
And I'm really excited, Bryn, because you had a really fun opportunity to do an open submission with Berkeley. They did an opportunity for people who are unagented to just send in their manuscripts and then go through the process of a normal query. They went through all of those books, and you were one of the very few that they took on, at which point you were able to go through the process of publishing your book with them. So let's go back to the very beginning of this. How did you discover they were doing an open submission?
I always think I spend too much time on Twitter, and I've been better about it lately. But I just happened to notice on Twitter Berkeley's open submissions, and it was like the last day or two, I think, when I submitted. And I just did it on a whim. I thought to myself, I'm probably not the person they're looking for. This story is kind of bonkers. But I just went ahead and did it anyway. It took about 15 minutes, and then I forgot all about it. Yeah. So, and then much later, after a little after I had parted ways with a publishing job and I was on my own, I also happened to notice on Twitter a a pitch event happening, and so I put a pitch out there for the book, and immediately my dream agent liked it. And so I said, so very lucky. And so I signed with my agent. I said I still need to fix up this book a little bit. And she was about to put it out on submissions when I got an email from the editor at Berkeley. And it surprised me at first because I didn't think my agent even sent it out yet. I thought she must have gotten it out and we must already have a response. And then I remembered the open submissions. So I told her, okay, I'll have my agent send it to you. And from there, it went very quickly. It was less than a week. So we sent the full, and I don't know, I want to say like, I'd have to go back and check. I want to say like 2 or 3 days later, I had a message from the editor saying she wanted to set up a call. And so I had the call with her and my agent, and she had so many wonderful things to say about the book. And so I asked, well, when does it go to the acquisitions meeting? In other words, when do you go and try to sell it up to the marketing and to the higher up editorial folks? And she told me it had already been through the acquisitions meeting. And then I had a 2 book deal from Berkeley that night. So it was very, very fast. Yeah.
Wow, that is such a fun process. And I really think when we get into a discussion about an open submission, we have to take into consideration that for these big publishing houses, they typically only allow agented submissions because so many come in. So when they do an open submission, that is for people who do not have an agent representing them yet. They're able to then submit those things, and usually they have some limitations on them. We've seen as it has progressed with Berkeley that they had a long period of time when you did it to submit, but now because they got so many, they narrowed it down to a shorter number or a shorter span of time in which they would take these submissions. It's
That's right. Yes. At the time, I didn't feel like I could seek agent representation because I was an acquiring editor and working with agents. And to me, it felt like it would be
a conflict.
crossing the streams, a conflict of interest. Yes. But when I saw the open submissions, I thought, I may as well try that. I wasn't surprised that it took so. It did take some time for them to get back to people from that first round of open submissions, but I really wasn't surprised by that. Having been a editor myself, I know what a heavy workload an editor already has, and to put open submissions and going through those on top of it is just a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so they were open for a whole month. And so they got over 5,000 submissions.
Wow.
That is a lot to go through.
Yes,
It's
it
so
is.
much. And so, of course, that was going to take some time. And I expected it to take time, and I figured they would get about that many submissions. And yeah, so I think they've looked at ways to make it a little bit more manageable this time around.
I'm
It's a
sure 'cause
lot.
that is a lot of work to get through. So, just in your estimation, are we talking like it took many weeks? Did it take many months to hear back? Was it a very long period of time?
It was pretty long. I can't say exactly how long it was. Yeah, but several months. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if people are going into that open submission, they can then be prepared to wait several months because there are quite a few to get through. And keeping in mind, these are not going through an agent to be qualified before going to this publishing house. So there's a
Ex-
lot to then go through.
exactly. Yeah. And it's on top of what they're already doing. And so it just takes some time to go through. And really you would want them to take some time. Like you want them to actually read your submission, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah.
We're
Yeah.
all hoping that they read it and don't just see our first paragraph and say, no, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, you want them to take time to consider it. So,
Mhm.
I think it's, a terrific opportunity for sure. Yeah.
And of course, with the submission process, you do have to make sure you're reading through all the directions and you're following all the instructions that they give you because if you don't, that's a very easy way to disqualify you. You, of course, went through the process of following those directions, sending in everything that you needed, and then you did the smart thing. You turned your attention elsewhere. You went for more opportunities for yourself and you got yourself an agent, at which point you could move forward with that. So you did not keep all of your eggs in one basket, just hoping and praying that one publishing house or one entity took you on. You took those steps and you moved forward. Because you did that,
Absolutely.
y
It's so easy and it's so easy for authors to get caught up in worrying about things because you're always waiting on something. You're waiting to try to get an agent. You're waiting because you're on sub, and um the best way to avoid obsessing is to work on your next project. Yeah, just to always be moving forward. Yeah. So, and that's gonna, serve you best as an author too, for sure.
absolutely.
So,
So once you went through the process of submitting and you were able to then get that deal, let's talk a little bit about what happened on the back end of this because we don't often see behind the curtain. So once you have gotten that email saying, we want to have that meeting, you had the meeting say, we want your book, and you go into negotiations on your contract, what does that look like on your end as the author working with an agent to work with the publishing house?
oh, absolutely. So on the initial call, my editor had a few really good notes about uh, shaping up the book that I agreed with. For instance, it's a very funny book, but it's also spicy. And so she wanted to make sure that the really heated parts of it, the heat, like spicy and also emotional, that a joke didn't come too close right after that,
Oh,
which totally made sense to
yeah.
me, and I thought it was a really smart note. It's
Mhm.
kind of like in some Marvel movies. I mentioned this to her, and she was like, "Yes, exactly." In some Marvel movies, they'll have, and I like them, but you'll have like a really emotional moment and then immediately a joke steps on it. And you're like, just let that moment hang for a minute. So it was a really good note. So she had a couple of really good notes like that right at the beginning when we were first talking. And so I did a little rewriting before even went into developmental edits. So that was a good discussion. And so it was a 2-book deal. A lot of times, a big 5 publisher will do a 2-book deal, which makes sense because you put a lot of marketing into one book and you don't want some other publishing house to like reap the benefits of the marketing that you put into that author. And so that's the reason a lot of times they'll do that. And from there wasn't a lot of there was there wasn't a lot of negotiation. Like, I mean, the contract, I've seen a lot of contracts myself, and everything, looked pretty good. So, I mean, there was a little bit, but that didn't take very long at all. And so I did a one little rewrite of the manuscript before I got it into developmental edits, and yeah, so then it went into that regular editorial process. Mhm.
So, with the editorial process, can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because you said you went through developmental edits. Did you then go through subsequent rounds of like line edits and things like that? Or was it all
Right.
kind of in one section and then you turned it back in and you were more or less good?
Right. So, like I said, it did one little rewrite. I got developmental edits back, and they were, I would say, about average in terms of how heavy of edits they were. And even though I am a book editor, that's what I do for a living, day, week in and week out. Um, I still had like hit a point, like a
Mhm.
feeling where, oh no, this book is garbage. You know, like you have that moment where, oh,
Yeah.
it's just a bag of trash. I had that feeling, but fortunately, because I was also an editor, my brain knew that that feeling was incorrect, you know. But I just want to be really candid about that because
Yeah.
when you get at its back, you can kind of hit that point where you're like, I don't know. There's so
Yeah.
many things I need to do, you know. And so it's really important to not get overwhelmed, you know, and
Mhm.
to attack the biggest things first, you know, go, you know, systematically, you know, through it. And you'll hit a point where you're like, a turning point, where you're like, oh, okay, it is okay. I
I
just want
love
to be
that.
really candid about that because I
Yeah.
think, especially, and this isn't my first book, but the first time I ever got developmental edits, I almost passed out.
It hurts.
I almost passed out. And it's you're just, you know, you're not used to it and it can be overwhelming. And I just want authors to know that it's that way for everybody, you know? And I've even talked to very, you know, much more experienced authors than me who still can get overwhelmed at that stage. So you got to stay calm and know that as you work through it, just systematically grind through it, address what needs to be addressed, that you know that it's going to be fine and the book's going to be so much better as a result. Yeah.
And I think that's such a valuable point because you were an editor. You knew
Yeah.
exactly what you were doing, but
Yeah.
because you were the author, you were very close to it. So you didn't have the same objectivity that other people did. So
Oh,
bringing in those other eyes.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
it is different when now, I mean, it does help in some
sure.
ways to have editing background, of
Mhm.
course, but there are still things that you know the characters, you know, so well, and
Yep.
things like that that uh there's it's still going to be different when it's your own for sure. Well, and
Absolutely.
plus different people just have different opinions,
Oh,
you know.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you know, I mean, there were probably a couple of things where I thought about it and then thought, "Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think that that makes sense to me."
I do that too. Sometimes I get notes from my editors and I
Yeah,
think, "Oh, I don't like that." But when I really think about it, it kinda makes sense and it makes the story better. And when I'm objective the way that they can be objective, it really works to everybody's benefit.
yeah,
So being
yeah.
able to work with a qualified team of people that you can trust is so incredibly important. So for you, as you continue down your journey of getting this book out into the world, what did the rest of this look like? Did you have meetings with them? Were there discussions? How much input did you have with them? What did it look like from your perspective as an author? Was it kind of just hands off once you turned in your edits?
Oh, no, I would say that it was very collaborative. And one thing that was written into my contract, because I have a background not only in editorial but also in creative direction for book covers, I I got into my contract that I would have say with the book cover. You know, I want to say like for a couple of real fears with traditional publishing that I hear from authors are one, the editor is going to make me make all these kinds of changes that I hate, and two, I'm going to have no input in the book cover. And this isn't always the case. In the case with editorial, I think most editors, if you have a serious concern, like, no, this really was my intention as an author, I really feel like this is going to take it off track, I think with most editors that that can be a dialogue. I didn't have that with this book. Um, you know, there was a couple of changes were along the lines of softening up a couple of things that I thought, yeah, I can kind of see softening that up. So I didn't really have any dialogues like that, but I think most editors are really open to that. And, it's not like you just lose control completely of your book. It's more of a conversation. And then authors worry a lot about not having control over the book covers. And it's important to realize that the people who are designing the books have an incredible amount of information about what's doing well and what isn't doing well. They have more information than the author does. But in my case, I also did have a lot of say in the cover. And so I got to see the original sketch from the artist because it's an illustrated cover. And I had some comments. So in the original one, for instance, she is holding a cup of coffee because I mentioned she drinks coffee all the time. So she's holding a cup of coffee, and I kind of wanted her to look a little more astonished. So he's a medieval knight that used to be a statue and came to life. Okay.
Which I love.
So I didn't want her to look too chill about that. And so I had her like holding her chest instead. I asked for that. Asked for him like kind of looking up more at her adoringly. And they were happy to um, take those notes. And so I really, oh, and I asked for, so it's inside the museum, but I asked for a skylight at the top for blue sky. I like to open it up just a little bit. I think that psychologically, there's a benefit to that. And so I'm sorry, that was really in the weeds. You can edit as you like.
No, that's great.
So I got to have a lot of input in the cover, and so there were discussions about that, and I felt like it was very collaborative. I even got to see, the inside layouts. Does this look good? Does this inside title page look good?
Wow.
And so yeah, I thought it was very collaborative all the way through. Yeah.
I love that. So how long was the process between signing on with them and actually getting the book out in the world?
Well, it's not out yet, so it's a very long process. So the book comes out on November 12th, 2024, so this year, and I signed the deal in June 2023. So that gives you about an idea of the cycle. The reason the books are done so much in advance is because the sales meetings they have with Barnes and Noble, with Target, etc., and with independent bookstores. Those sales meetings happen 6, 8 months, I'm not exactly sure exactly, but something like that before the book comes out. The stores are placing orders. And
Mhm.
so that's what backs up the whole schedule, so you're driving to that date with the sales meetings. Yeah.
Mhm. And of
Yeah.
course, you have a 2-book deal, so your first book is coming out in the not too distant future. You're
Yeah.
working on your second book right now. What does that scheduling look like for the separation between the release of the first and the second book?
So I would like for book two to come out a year after book one, but it's a hustle. So with my book two, I had one whole concept that I had done mounds and mounds of research on. I had about 30,000 words on, and then Berkeley passed on it. They didn't like that direction for book two. And when they
Okay.
talked about it, I could understand why. Even though I loved my idea, it
Yeah.
made sense because it was time travel and it would have been mostly in the past. And it makes sense for it to be weird to have a contemporary one and then have one that's mostly in the past. So it
Sure.
made sense to me, but I had to go back to the drawing board. um, but then I had a concept I worked really hard on, and I thought, oh gosh, well, I'm going to send it to them. They're probably going to have a lot of notes. No, they loved it.
There
So
you
that
go.
was great. So that's what I'm working on now. So once we had one that we agreed on, I said, how soon do you need this to get it out for fall of the next year? And it's a very tight schedule. So I'm going to be working really hard this summer. But I think I can do it. When I was working for Hallmark Publishing, that is the publishing imprint that I headed up. I wrote one book for them, and I wrote it in 3.5 months between midnight and 5 a.m. so,
Oh, wow.
so I know I can turn it around when I need to. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. So Then when it comes to your initial contract negotiation, when you sign on for a two-book deal, do you have a discussion at all on that second book, or is it just saying, "We're gonna do a second book"?
See, that's I think something that a lot of that isn't clear to a lot of folks, right? And so the agreement is that we're doing a second book, but we don't know what that book, a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times you don't know what that second book is yet. I had talked a little bit in that initial Zoom about my ideas for the second book, and I think they gave it a lot of consideration actually,
Yeah.
but in the end felt like they needed another contemporary, which again, to me, it does make sense, even though I liked the other idea. Yeah. So, yeah, so a lot of times that second book, you're not sure what it's going to be yet. And then it's the author working with the editor to nail that second idea.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's dive into this a little bit. You submitted this unagented, and by the time it rolled around that the email came in, you had an agent. Do
That's
you
right.
feel like you were better prepared to have the conversations with the publishing house, bringing an agent in? Because I know with a lot of these open submissions, they say you can absolutely bring an agent. If you are submitting without an
Oh,
agent, go get yourself an agent and bring them in, but you don't have to. So do you feel like it's more to an reader's benefit to have an agent brought in, or can they kind of just go this alone with a publishing agent? Not an agent, a lawyer, a publishing lawyer. Always have a lawyer read over your contracts. But what do you think?
yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, anytime you have an offer in hand, this is a great time to go get an agent, and and boy, when you email them or uh, put, um, put it that you have an offer, put that in the subject line,
Yep.
and you're likely to hear back. It's just a really good time to do it. I think there are great advantages to having representation. There are fiddly little things with the contract that um, it's not just that I wouldn't know to ask for them because I kind of would, but also like I just kind of hate dealing with as an author. There are
Yeah.
just fiddly little things that they are better able to, to address. And well, I mean, first of all, if you haven't read a lot of contracts, yeah, as you say, you need to have someone read over it. It's
Yep.
really important. There, certain clauses in particular that are really important for authors,
Yeah.
that you need that experienced eye on. Um, but an agent isn't just about the one deal. They're about the whole career. So I
Yeah.
signed with my agent, and this was before I had the offer in hand. I had some other interest as well after the pitch event where I got my agent. But your agent is talking to you about your whole career and what you want to do, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think that that's so important. So, yeah.
I think that can be incredibly helpful too, because so often writers come into these conversations thinking quick win, quick hit of money, quick contract, gonna
Yeah.
agree to whatever just to get their foot in the door, sometimes
Right.
even out of desperation. And having
Right.
an agent there to really be able to speak into the future of your career
Yeah.
is so
Yeah.
important. And
Yeah.
of course, if you are going to enter into a contract, we have tons of videos with a lawyer here on the channel that you can check out. I'll link those down
That's really
below.
good. Yeah. And the agent isn't just about a book deal.
Yeah.
So if I had something that was happening that was a concern to me, and I don't even know what it would be, but all kinds of things happen to authors, right?
Yeah.
And so if I had something that I was like, oh, I don't even know what to do. My first stop is to text my agent, right? And that hasn't even come up yet, but that would be my first stop. And sometimes I've seen authors sort of spilling their guts on Twitter about some messy situation,
Yeah.
or on TikTok, and I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. Talk to your agent first. Talk to
Yeah.
them first. So there's someone who's always there to advise you, who's always there to troubleshoot, the things, and give you feedback. And if you're like me and you have an editorial sort of literary agent that can give you great feedback on the writing itself too. Yeah. So,
Very important. So
yeah.
when it comes to doing things like open submission, what is your best piece of advice for writers who are going to see maybe the Berkeley open submission or some other publishing house open submissions in the future for
Yeah.
taking that step?
You know, a lot of times, so I work a lot with people on their query letters because I have read thousands of them, which really helps. And I do worry a lot of times that good books don't go anywhere because the authors didn't know how to pitch, you know?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of different ways to write a query letter because I also have a lot of experience pitching to producers, in my case, Hallmark movie producers. Uh, I think a formula that works really well for me is to figure out the log line, okay? Lead with that log line, one or two sentences that really grabs you, and then say genre, word count, right after that. A lot of times people call that housekeeping, genre, word count, and put it at the end. I like it at the top, and I asked a bunch of agents and editors on Twitter, "Do you also like at the top?" And they all said yes, because then immediately you know that you've got something that you actually publish. This is actually something you publish. Yeah. So log line, and then my book title, word count, title, genre is complete at X amount of words. Yeah. So to me, that's a really strong opening, the really strong formula. There's a lot of ways to do it. Okay. But that really cuts right to the chase in terms of you can get very complicated in a pitch and say, I have this character and she's worried about this. Oh, and she also collects butterflies and
Yeah.
so me, logline, title, genre, word count, right at the top really helps. So that's my advice. And log lines are tough, I have a blog post that's 100 log lines, 50 for movies, 50 for books to check out. But I think that that's a good,
We'll link that down
strong,
below.
strong lead in. And you mentioned before about following all the guidelines, and I think I've seen a lot of concern about word count in particular, like, so what if my book is 50,000 words? So is, Hemingway or F. Scott Fitzgerald, or so what if it's 150,000 words? So is George R. R. Martin, and it is really important to fit. There are business reasons why really short books or really long books don't work, especially for a debut author. And
Mhm.
so I think part of the art of writing commercial fiction is hitting that word count. And so, yeah, fitting into all the guidelines is really important. You don't want to have just an auto reject, because you didn't nail it in there. Yeah.
It's so
So,
easy to not follow the rules and get that auto reject, and
yeah,
then you've wasted your time. So making sure you
exactly.
follow the directions, which, by the
Yeah.
way, will be different from publisher to publisher to agent, so you must read every single website that you're going to be submitting to because they can look wildly and drastically different. And if you read one and assume it's the same for all, that's not going to work to your benefit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
As
It's
always, if you listeners have questions on this, go ahead and drop it down below. Bryn is coming back for another episode where we're talking all about Hallmark. I'm very excited because we love talking about Hallmark here.
yeah.
So make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell, and as always, you can reach out to Bryn on her social medias. Bryn, where can everybody find you?
My blog is bryndonovan.com. I am on Twitter. I am on TikTok. I'm on Instagram. I'm everywhere. So look for Bryn Donovan or Bryn Donovan author. Thanks.
And one more time, tell us about your book.
Yes, so Her Night at the Museum is a magical rom-com about a medieval statue, no, a medieval knight who is magically turned into stone and an art conservator in modern day Chicago who brings him back to life.
Drop your questions on open submissions down below. And if you've seen an open submission, this is a great place to have a community conversation to warn other people about these upcoming events so that we can all participate and help to grow ourselves in the publishing space. And as always, we have daily videos helping you navigate the world of publishing, from your writing to your publishing to your marketing, to make this your most profitable year ever with the least amount of stress and overwhelm as you continue your author journey. Drop your questions down below. Bryn's coming back for upcoming episodes, and we've got some really cool things planned that you do not want to miss.